Let's just get right to the sound bites. Here's the first one. Al Gore in San Francisco, the Commonwealth Club. His speech was entitled Iraq and the War on Terrorism, and here's just a little bit of it.
Rather than making efforts to dispel these concerns at home and abroad about the role of politics and the timing of policy.
Stop the tape. You're listening to the IQ of a pencil eraser here, folks. I mean, jeez.
The president is on the campaign trail 2 or 3 days a week, often publicly taunting Democrats with the political...
Stop the tape! Jesus! Folks, I warn you, you may be having to hit your own delete button out there today. What the hell was Clinton doing? His whole last 2 years in office, for crying out. What his whole 8 years in office? The press just never counted him up like the press is counting him up with Bush. So what, he's out there fundraising? Money is the mother's milk of politics. What are you sucking lately?
Consequences of a no vote. The Republican National Committee is running prepackaged advertising based on the same theme. All of this apparently in keeping with a political strategy clearly described in a White House aide's misplaced computer disk, which advised Republican operatives that their principal game plan for success in the election a few weeks away was to, quote, focus on the war. Vice President Cheney, meanwhile, has indignantly described suggestions of any such thing as reprehensible, and then the following week took his discussion of the war to the Rush Limbaugh show.
I don't think there was any applause there because I don't think the audience got it. This is Inside Baseball. This is right off the Terry McAuliffe, Paul Begala fax machine. Well, let's go back, my friends. We'll take you back to November 17th, 1993, the Rush TV show. We played a clip that ran on NBC News with Lisa Myers, a report about NAFTA.
House Speaker Thomas Foley, although a NAFTA supporter, remained almost invisible. That left the president no choice but to assemble the strangest political bedfellows in a long time. The Wall Street Journal, Republican Newt Gingrich, erstwhile enemy Rush Limbaugh, whom the administration now calls a distinguished American.
It was... that's the audience on my TV show laughing. It was Al Gore himself in the Perot-NAFTA debate who called me a distinguished American back in 1993 during the debate with Perot. Now, of course, anybody who goes on my show is blatantly political, as though that somehow is out of the realm of reasonableness or whatever. I've lost my energy to even comment on this guy. I don't even think I have to. It's so obvious. Oh, it just burns me up. It just really does. I've been mad all morning that I've got to spend my time on this guy and refuting this stuff. It's just this whole business of AIDS misplaced computer disk, which advised Republican operatives that their principal game plan for success in the election, a few weeks away was to, quote, focus on the war. Well, let me tell you something, Al Gore. If the Republicans were faced with, almost said it again, if they were faced a bunch of knucklehead losers like you people, why not make it political? Because what's the issue? National security and trying to keep America from being attacked again. We don't want another September 11th. And if you guys do not think that's a big deal, and the Republicans do, and the American people do, then what the hell is wrong with the Republicans capitalizing on it? This is the business of politics. There's nothing that doesn't happen in Washington that's not politics. And this notion that there is what's insulting to me. It's all politics. Every damn bit of it's politics. Always has been. Social Security is politics. The compassion of Washington is politics. Giving away money to people that don't need it is politics. Giving away money to people that do need it is politics. Trying to create more people that want money that don't need it is politics, and it's all from the Democrats, who are a bunch of bleeding heart socialists. Their whole lives are politics. There's not a genuine strain of humanity in these people that isn't touched by a political motivation or angle. And for these guys to run around and act like they are clean and pure as the wind-driven snow, while at the same time, if they prevail, subjecting us to more terror, subjecting us to more surprise attacks. If they prevail, there will prevail politically, and we will have found ourselves in a political nightmare. These arguments are political. Politics is how we manage our national affairs, folks. Kosovo was political. Look, I'm getting way ahead of myself here because I'm even arguing the wrong point. The fact of the matter is that Al Gore, back in the campaign of 2000, was openly promising that he would, if he was elected, I will do what my commander-in-chief, Bill Clinton, promises he will do. He promised to take out Hussein. He promised, I'm going to have the stories, I've got them here in the stack. They're coming, but since this is a day of torture, I'm going to subject myself to more of it. Here's more idiocy from Al Gore at the Commonwealth Club in San Francisco yesterday. Yip, 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 yip.
I believe that we ought to be focusing our efforts first and foremost against those who attacked us on September 11th and who have thus far gotten away with it. The vast majority of those who sponsored, planned, and implemented the cold-blooded murder of more than 3,000 Americans are still at large, still neither located nor apprehended, much less punished and neutralized. I do not believe that we should allow ourselves to be distracted from this urgent task simply because it is proving to be more difficult and lengthy than was predicted.
Hold it. Predicted? That it was predicted to be short? The president said this war on terrorism would probably outlast his 2 terms. There was no promise that this would happen fast. The promises that things happen fast militarily came from this klutz and his president. They told us we'd be out of Kosovo in a year, and we're still there. They told us we'd be out of Haiti. For all I know, we're still there gumming that up. Wherever they told us we were going to go and be out of, we're still there. These guys couldn't find their toenails in a bathtub with a set of clippers. I'll finish this piece of garbage.
Persevere and then prevail. They do not jump from one unfinished task to another. We should
stop
remain...
the tape! It's the same task, you idiot! I'm sorry, I realize I'm not being politic here. Not being understanding, not being reasonable, not being whatever, but jeez. I told you I can't. Either he's an idiot or just a blatant liar or a combination of the two. I don't know who wrote this, Karenna, Tipper, Terry McAuliffe. I have no idea who wrote it, but whoever wrote it, thank God they're not running a country.
Focus on the war against terrorism. And I believe that we are perfectly capable of staying the course in our war against Osama bin Laden and his terrorist network while simultaneously taking those steps necessary to build an international coalition to join us in taking on Saddam Hussein in a timely fashion. If you're going after Jesse James, you ought to organize the posse first, especially if you're in the middle of a gunfight with somebody who's out after you.
We're working on the he had nothing to do with the first coalition. This is a guy who sold his vote on the Gulf War to Bob Dole, because Bob Dole, running the Senate at the time, promised Gore he'd get more TV time to explain his stupid vote than George Mitchell, who was running the Senate for the Democrats at that time. Besides Al Gore, what you don't get, and what you'll never get, and what Democrats don't get, is very simple. The United States of America, we are the posse, and the sheriff, and the constable, and the jailer. I want to now quote a story, yes, I have time. Vice President Al Gore remarks on Iraq. Now, this is May 23rd, the year 2000. On May 23rd, Vice President Al Gore addressed AIPAC's annual policy conference. That's the American Israel Political Action Committee, known in Germany as the Jewish Lobby. His speech included a short section known in Palestine as the Jewish Lobby. Just so you know who we're talking about, Al Gore was speaking to. That's what it's called by the people who don't like it. But its name is AIPAC, the American Israel Political Action Committee. And Gore was there putting them to sleep. He said the classic challenges of war and peace extend beyond Israel's immediate neighborhood to Iran and Iraq. In 1991, I broke with many in my own party and voted to use force to stop Saddam Hussein's aggression in the Middle East. And I'll remind you, he only broke with his own party because he got more time from the Republicans to explain his vote on the floor of the Senate on TV. These are actual Gore remarks I'm reading to you now, folks. Just imagine all this is in quotes. Despite our swift victory and all our efforts since, there is no doubt in my mind that Saddam Hussein still seeks to amass weapons of mass destruction. You know as well as I do, as long as Saddam Hussein stays in power, there can be no comprehensive peace for the people of Israel or the people of the Middle East. We have made it clear that it is our policy to see Saddam Hussein gone. We have sought conditions of opponents to challenge his power from within or without. I've met with the Iraqi resistance. I've invited them to meet with me again next month, and I will encourage them to further unite in their efforts against Saddam Hussein. By the way, May of 2000 is in the middle of what? Presidential campaign. Yes, my friends, Al Gore's running for president here. When he's talking to the AIPAC people running for president, why Hussein's got to go, and he's going to continue Clinton's policy. He's going to wipe Hussein out, whether we get a coalition or not, because Israel cannot exist peacefully as long as there's terrorism or Iraq or Iran nearby. We made it clear that's our policy to see Saddam gone. We've sought coalitions of opponents to challenge his power from within or without. I've met with the Iraqi resistance. And I've invited them to meet with me again next month, when I'll encourage them to further unite in their efforts against Saddam. We have maintained sanctions in the face of rising criticism while improving the oil-to-food program to help the Iraqi people directly. That's not true. It's people breaking the embargo that are helping Saddam Hussein. The people of Iraq are still starving. We have used force when necessary, and we will not let up in our efforts to free Iraq from Saddam's rule unless my opponent wins. And then I will have to oppose him because he is my opponent. So remember, if I lose, everything I'm saying to you now is not true. May as well have said that too. Of course he didn't. We should not let up in our efforts to free Iraq from Saddam's rule. Should he think of challenging us, I would strongly advise against it. As a senator, I voted for the use of force. As vice president, I supported the use of force. And if entrusted with the presidency, my resolve will never waver. Well, his resolve has wavered, and he wasn't entrusted with the presidency, as so many Democrats were thankful for. I have a little excerpt here from a story in the New York Times by Richard L. Burke, a reporter. It reads as follows. Some Gore supporters are even privately expressing satisfaction that Mr. Gore did not win. Several Democrats said the nation was fortunate to have Mr. Bush in power, and they questioned whether Mr. Gore would have surrounded himself with as experienced a foreign policy team as Mr. Bush did. One former senator who was a staunch Gore backer said he was relieved Bush was president because he feared the former vice president would think he had all the answers. A top appointee in the Clinton administration, criticizing the qualifications of those he expected to be Mr. Gore's foreign policy team, said he couldn't imagine Gore's foreign policy advisors running at war against Afghanistan. Now, not even Mr. Gore's closest aides would assert that their candidate would have done any better. Contrary to that, Mr. Burke, they're all talking about how much worse shape we'd all be in if Gore had been elected. But what to make of all this? I mean, back in 1998, Gore's all for it. In 2000, running for president, promising the American Israel Political Action Committee he's going to continue the Clinton administration policy, which we've documented for you here back from all those people in 1998, all the Democrats who were all for literally wiping the face of the earth with Saddam Hussein's clothes and the rest of him. I mean, they couldn't wait, and the Democrats are all for it. And Gore promised that if he were elected president, this would never change. Now, I know he wasn't elected president, and that may be his out, but it's not an out. It's just blatant hypocrisy. It's a flip-flop. It's a blatant flip-flop. It's a purposeful flip-flop. And thus, it's totally political. Now, we'll be continuing to do research here, my friends, and found something interesting here in the Washington Post, June 3rd, 2000. And as a result of this story, I mean, if so many things happen that it's not possible to remember them all, but this story talks about the Bush campaign's objectives in Iraq. And they're doing exactly what they said they were going to do. It shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody that Bush is going to do something about Saddam Hussein. It was all part of the 2000 presidential campaign. Remember, after Bush was elected, the Democrats had this problem. They went public with it. Oh, we don't know how to deal with a guy who's actually going to do what he said he was going to do in a campaign. Well, that's a new trick. How we don't have a defense for this. I mean, we're used to people making promises and not keeping them, but this guy's going to do what he says, so we're not geared up for that. I mean, they said that. At the governor's mansion in Austin last year, this is June 3rd, 2000 now, in the governor's mansion in Austin last year, a top foreign policy advisor to George W. Bush casually suggested to him that we ought to have been rid of Saddam Hussein a long time ago. And then the advisor went, oops, I just insulted his dad. The advisor need not have been worried, though. While avoiding specific commitments, Bush has vowed publicly that he would adopt a more aggressive posture than even President Clinton has taken toward Iraq. Several of his top foreign policy advisors have publicly advocated a plan by Iraqi opposition groups to overthrow the regime with a U.S.-backed offensive from enclaves carved out of southern and northern Iraq. In June of 2000, the Bush campaign had already assembled battle plans for Iraq. Now, the point of this is none of this should come as a surprise. None of this is cowboyism. This is simply understanding a foreign policy threat and dealing with it. September 11th happens, and the plan is, accelerated? Their views suggest that the opposition plan, which has been embraced by Republicans and some Democrats in Congress, this is the overthrow idea, but derided by critics as a recipe for an Iraqi inversion of the Bay of Pigs, almost certainly would win renewed attention in the early months of a Bush presidency. We eventually have to undermine Hussein's position within his own country, and that means slowly taking away pieces of his territory, said Robert Zellick, an Undersecretary of State in the previous Bush administration who was advising the Texas governor's campaign. He said this at a May 19th forum sponsored by the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. We have started to do that in the North. I believe we could do it in the South. I believe it in part. This involves American air power. It might involve more. And it goes on. There's this, then. There are now signs that Vice President Gore is trying to distance himself from the administration's Iraq policy. He's agreed to meet with the group from the Institute for Near East Policy in Washington on June 26, recently told an audience of the American-Israel Public Affairs Committee, it is our policy to see Saddam Hussein gone. So it's all over the place here, in the middle of the campaign, what Gore was saying. Now, he just went out and made fools of these people at the Commonwealth Club. These people at the Commonwealth Club are sitting there, applauding various, and there's no mention of a coalition here. No mention. And did the Clinton administration put together a coalition? Was there any talk of a coalition in 1998? And all the quotes we ferreted out, in all of the Tom Daschle and Gephardt and Clinton et al., Albright, Sandy Berger, was there any talk of a coalition? No, we bombed without a coalition. We bombed on a Saturday where the custodian was the only guy in the building, but we did it, and we didn't do it with a coalition. There was no talk from anybody about a coalition, and the UN didn't say a word. Kofi Annan didn't say a word. He didn't care because this was Bill Clinton. Probably surprised Clinton went that far. Yet nevertheless, there was none of this talk of coalition. All this coalition talk is a Democrat new name for obstacle. They don't want this to happen. Gore doesn't want this to happen. He wants to be reelected president. He doesn't want this to happen because they all know it's going to work. They all know it's going to succeed. And they all know that George W. Bush is going to be praised to the hilt for sticking to his guns despite all of this silly, childish little opposition that he's getting from these purely political pandas who wouldn't know the right thing to do if it slapped them in the face and a rear end. They are afraid of success because they are so political on this. It's not about America. It's not about preventing another 9/11. It's about preventing Republicans staying in the White House. It's about Democrats getting their power back in Washington. That's all that matters here right now. I'm not saying that they don't care about American security. I'm saying they subvert that to their own power, or they subordinate it to their own power. Their own power comes first. They'll take care of American security later. I'm sure they will. But they are throwing up all of these things merely as obstacles. They have seen that there are some little soft underbellied countries around the world like Germany and France, and all Al Gore and the Democrats are trying to do is light a fire under those countries and make them braver and bolder so that they will become bigger obstacles for the administration to overcome. That's all this is. It's not about anything other than stopping this action because the Democrats know it will succeed. They do not want it to succeed when it's not run by them, because they think they lose when America wins. And they do. And they know it. They do lose when America wins, and whose fault is that? None but theirs. It is they who put themselves in the position they occupy. They have put themselves in the position that is opposed to that which they were for, rabidly, 4 years ago. They've done so for one reason, politics. They've done so so that they can hopefully stop this action from taking place. Because if it does, they lose. Stop and think of that. America wins, Al Gore and Daschle and the rest of the Democratic opposition, along with Chuck Hagel, lose. Which side would you rather be on here, folks? You want to be on the side that when America wins, you win? I don't even... To me, it isn't even a legitimate question, because the answer has one aspect to it that's obscene. Well, actually, I think it would be better if this didn't work, because we are then going to think we can police the world. They'll come up with anything to explain their position, my friends, but I want you to understand all this talk is nothing more than a bunch of blather. And I'm telling you who it's aimed at. It's not aimed even at the American people. They'll deal with you later for not figuring it out. This is aimed at the United Nations and the population there that's opposed to America. This is aimed at Gerhard Schroeder. This is aimed at Jacques Chirac. It's aimed at all the Middle Eastern countries except Israel, because they know that's going to affect Israel. But they're trying to create as much opposition to the president as they can. I think they're pretty much convinced that domestic opposition is small and isn't going to stop whatever action the administration is taking. But if they can get the international community all riled up, maybe they can stop it. Well, yeah, they're aimed at me, but think of that. Think of that. I mean, here in a speech to the Commonwealth Club, it's got to cite me as almost, and then Cheney. You don't even just me and Cheney almost in the same. Oh, what context is Saddam Hussein? I don't know. I just, whatever they can do to come up with opposition, folks, is what they're doing. And it isn't going to work, because they're only making fools of themselves. I mean, they're in quicksand. They're not standing on anything firm as they flip-flop like this all over the place. They're like fish out of water, with their oxygen supply rapidly depleted. Hello, sir. Welcome. Missouri.
Hi, Rush. I believe that Al Gore is doing this in order to weaken the stance of the Democrats in the fall election by prolonging the debate on Iraq and distracting them from the issues that they believe can help their election chances.
Why does he want to undercut his own party members?
I believe it's all part of his own political aspirations. He thinks that if the Democrats are in power in 2004, that people like Daschle and Gephardt will have more press coverage and a leg up in the 2004 primaries, which will hurt him.
Oh, if you're right, this guy's a bigger reprobate than I even conceived of here in my rage. I got to think about that. You know, Keith, I'm going to make you the temporary caller of the day for website recognition. You're going to be tough to outdo here today, but you could end up being it. Thanks much. I'll have to ponder this. He's sabotaging his own party to take out his Democratic presidential opponents for the 2004 primary. It's possible with this guy. It's possible. I want to talk about what this last caller said. If you're just joining us and missed the last caller of the hour, we spent the first hour reviewing Gore's speech, commenting on it, and, if I say so myself, fairly well decimating it. But last call of the day brought up an interesting point. Let me put this in perspective. The Democrats have been out there floating trial balloons for the past, year, but I mean in this instance for the past 3 weeks. Terry McAuliffe was on a Sunday show 2 or 3 weeks ago, and 5 times in one answer to a question used the term kitchen table issues. Daschle last week said, okay, what, you want a resolution? Fine. We'll get you one, whatever you want, Mr. President. You want to attack Iraq? Fine, we'll get you one. And that afternoon, when I did that at the White House, that afternoon went to the floor of the Senate and said, this administration has let us down on the economy, unemployment. He gave all this a list of economic horror stories, none of which are true. But the point is that the Democrats are trying to get the focus off Iraq and put it on domestic issues because there's an election coming up and the Republicans are running full speed ahead of them in all the polling data when it comes to issues leading up to the election, primarily the war on terrorism and Iraq, where the president and his party have overwhelming advantage in the polls. And it's very close to the election. This is a concern. Well, after that speech on the economy from the Senate floor, it must not have worked. They must have been doing some polling data out there. It must not have worked because Democratic candidates out there, they were urging Daschle and the other Democrats in Washington, just sign a resolution and just give a resolution. Would you get this off of the front page? We've got issues out here that people care about, the economy, blah, 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 and we can't run on them because this Iraq thing's all over the news. So Daschle does his economic speech. Apparently doesn't work because the next day he trashed the environment. Anything to try to drum up support among the American people. It didn't work. But they're still trying to. I mean, they're still harping on it. More and more Democrats are coming out talking about how the president has let the economy down, and all this war is a political diversion from his failed economic policies. So out of the blue, here comes Al Gore yesterday at the Commonwealth Club. And what does he do but put Iraq back on the front page for the rest of the month, practically? And I'm wondering, and not once in the Gore speech, and I know there was Terry McAuliffe influence in the speech because he mentioned Cheney's appearance on this program, which is right out of the Democratic National Committee's homepage. So I know McAuliffe is involved in this, which means Clinton was involved in this. There wasn't one mention of kitchen table issues in the Gore speech. He just, for all the effort the Democrats have made to bring the economy and other domestic issues back to the forefront, Gore just swept it off the table for him. So we had a caller at the end of the hour says, I think he's doing this on purpose. Why, I said. This is because he's trying to discredit all of his primary opponents leading up to 2004. He's trying to make sure they don't win anything this time around so that they can't go into the 2004 primaries as winners. If they lose the Senate, if they don't keep the Senate, and if they don't get the House back, and if Daschle's unable to get domestic issues, but why would anybody elect him president? What happens to his campaign? And all these senators who want to be like John F. Kerry and all that, they're gone too. And it's left to Al Gore. Now the question is he that selfish? Well, before we answer that, let's go back and ask who's running this party. Bill Clinton is running this party. Would Clinton undercut his own party for his own advantage? Ask Andrew Cuomo. Hillary Clinton promised to stay neutral, then endorsed Cuomo's opponent, Carl McCall. Then Bill went up to Andrew and basically said, "Hey, pal, I thank you for the good of the party. You better quit here, pal. You don't have a chance." Bill Clinton never quit for his party. His party had to take all the bullets for Bill Clinton. And so here's Gore, basically. It's an interesting theory. It's an interesting theory. The only other theory that works, is that the Democrats have decided, after all these trial balloons, that they're still unified. This is the other theory. They're still unified. And they have just figured out that this isn't going to work. They're not going to be able to get the economy on the front page. They're not going to get the environment on the front page. They're trying, but it's not working. So maybe they just got to unify here and do everything they can to keep this Iraq war from happening, now or after the election. Because this speech of Gore's, when he actually expresses concern for Germany after they insult President Bush, it tells me that he's trying to embolden these opponents in Europe, make them braver, so they'll get even louder in opposition and try to undercut whatever negotiations are going on with these people at the White House. So one of those two theories is applicable here, I'm sure. And we'll see. I'd be interested in what your thoughts on this are. I say that knowing I'm taking a risk, but I wouldn't mind knowing. There's two ways to go, but it's fascinating to me because the efforts to take Iraq off the front page the Democrats are making are not